Good evening and welcome to Primetime Lawmakers for March 29, 2011, the 35th legislative day of the 2011 session of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Scott Slade. Coming up in tonight's program, an extensive tax overhaul bill passes the Special Joint Committee on Georgia Revenue Structure. Democrats voice their opposition. The Senate gives final passes to a tougher bill cracking down on human trafficking and child prostitution. We continue our leadership interview series. Tonight, Senate Appropriations Chairman Jack Hill and the progress of the FY 2012 budget. And the Sunday sales bill could be up for a full House vote sometime this week. We'll check on the progress of the legislation with Representative Roger Williams, who's carrying the bill in the House, and Amy Henderson of the Georgia Municipal Association will join us to take a look at how the first local votes on Sunday package alcohol sales might work. All that's coming up tonight in Primetime Lawmakers. But first, we go to the Capitol, where Wandi Lawson is standing by with word that the state tax overhaul bill has cleared committee. Good evening, Wandi.
Well, good evening, Scott. As you reported last night, the Special Joint Committee on Georgia Revenue Structure received a new version of that tax bill yesterday. Today, committee members say that instead of receiving an email notice, they were actually invited in person to attend the committee meeting. And about 2 hours ago, that committee gave HB 387 a due pass recommendation. With taxes on groceries, Girl Scout cookies, and attorney's fees off the table, the committee this afternoon learned of one change to the tax exemption for telecommunications companies, originally estimated at $90 million.
That number was based on industry numbers provided us by the Revenue Department and members of the telecom industry. The latest year that they had data was 2009. And since we had relied upon that number, that amounts to about $1.3 billion worth of new investment in Georgia, which we think will have a lot to do with job creation in this state. However, it was based on 2009 numbers, and this is 2012, and it was to balance the revenue neutrality of this. So in an abundance of caution, since we relied on that number in an exact state, we have decided to put a cap of $90 million on the value of that exemption. So if investment actually were to exceed $90 million worth of exemption in 1 year, it would be subject to full local and state sales tax.
Committee passage of HB 387 does not sit well with House Democrats, who voted this morning to oppose the tax proposal. According to the minority party, the measure doesn't give small business enough incentive to create jobs. Democrats also argue that the measure is moving too quickly to allow input from Democrats or from the general public, and that what's being billed as a tax-cutting measure will actually hit the pocketbooks of middle-class families.
Most middle-class families in the middle income ranges they itemize. And if you are an itemizer, if you make between $80,000 and $160,000, you will pay on average between $219 and $419 more in your taxes. The problem is if you're a non-itemizer, you're held harmless, and that's important. But that represents roughly between 12 and 4% of the population. The vast majority of the middle class itemizes because they want the mortgage deduction. And their tax burden is higher if they're paying federal taxes. So they're going to choose to itemize. But that means on the state level, you get hit twice. You get hit first with our income tax increase, and you get hit a second time with the new sales taxes, which by and large will affect middle income families as well.
Again, HB 387 cleared the Special Joint Committee on Georgia Revenue Structure and could be on the House floor as early as tomorrow. In other news, final passage today of new penalties for those convicted of human trafficking and protections for victims of that crime. Here's Senator Renee Unterman with HB 200.
According to the FBI, Metro Atlanta is a national hub of human trafficking in general and trafficking in victims of sexual servitude in particular. These victims are subjected to servitude by manipulation and subjugation through the savage use of physical and sexual violence, drugs, manipulation, isolation, coercion, threats, economic dependence, and emotional abuse. This is not an issue that is black or white, Democrat or Republican. It's the fact that we want to take care of our children in the state of Georgia, that we want to clean up our act, that we're willing to step up to the plate and recognize, yes, we do have a problem, and the rest of the nation has a problem too. We're right up there with Chicago, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, but we're willing to step up to the plate and do something about it.
House Bill 200 passed without opposition and now requires the governor's signature to become law. The House agreed today to encourage the Department of Transportation to call in the services of local governments and private contractors to clear the roads when severe weather strikes. But SR 30 drew fire from one representative who wants to make sure that the DOT fairly distributes that work.
What this resolution does, it says, first of all, that there are many contractors and local governments out there that have pieces of equipment and manpower that could have aided us during this difficult time, because quite simply the Georgia Department of Transportation just does not have the manpower nor the equipment and the resources to have handled an emergency of this scale.
I want to make sure that we urge the Department of Transportation to make sure that they include the 33% of people that are in this state of Georgia. That's African Americans. And I want to make sure that that's done if we're going to urge. And I want this to go on record. Isn't it true that I'm urging that African Americans be included when we're talking about getting no-bid contracts to remove snow?
So noted. Thank you very much.
Now, the Hextall note there was not included in the bill. SR 30 cleared the House by a vote of 149 to 20, marking final passage. It now heads to the governor's office. The Senate Insurance and Labor Committee today passed two measures promoting the state's ability to enter into interstate health care compacts. HB 413 allows the governor to select a compact which would ally the state with other states in the same situation. And HB 461 asserts that the state has a right to enter into these compacts based on its 10th Amendment rights.
There are over 200 interstate compacts in effect today. Interstate compacts are powerful. They're durable and adaptive tools for ensuring cooperation among states. Our joining this compact will allow us to have the maximum state flexibility to innovate and better manage our health care, market, and the Medicare and Medicaid systems that threaten our fiscal future. The compacts that suspend federal law do require congressional approval, and we feel that Congress will consent if enough member states collectively seek approval.
Both HB 413 and HB 461 were given due pass recommendations and sent to the Senate Rules Committee. The Senate Insurance and Labor Committee also approved a bill aimed at preventing future insurance commissioners from granting themselves licenses without going through the application and examination process, as former Commissioner John Oxendine did. However, HB 347 now also contains the language of SB 147, which expands that restriction to all elected officials. The committee approved HB 347. SB 147 is currently in the House Ethics Committee awaiting consideration. Reporting live from the Capitol, I'm Wandi Lawson for Primetime Lawmakers.
Wandi, it sounds like there's some disagreement between Democrats and Republicans about whether the tax code revision will be an overall tax cutting measure.
Yeah, it does sound that way. Scott, the Republicans, of course, are promoting that flat 4.5% income tax for businesses and individuals is going to be a savings overall. But we heard from House Majority Leader Representative Larry O'Neill. He says that new tax is the new tax forms actually that are going to be used for actually completing these taxes will be kind of equivalent to those EZ forms that we see. And so he says that middle class families will also save money because they won't need an accountant. That's going to be a savings. But you also heard from House Minority Leader Stacey Abrams, who's a tax attorney. She's arguing that eliminating exemptions like mortgage interest is ultimately going to hurt middle class taxpayers. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of debate when it comes to the House floor.
Well, yeah, it's certainly supposed to be revenue neutral. We'll have to watch that closely. Thank you so much, Wandi.
Thank you, Scott.
In our Capitol report last night, Senate Appropriations Chairman Jack Hill said that growth in public education personnel at all levels, from bus drivers to administrators, has placed a strain on the state employee health system. In our leadership segment tonight, Wandi continues her discussion with Senator Hill by asking how the state is going to handle the mounting costs.
The system's going to have to pay more for health insurance for the non-certified employees. That price has got to move up to more accurately reflect the cost of services. Remember, we're self-insured. So what we pay out in claims becomes the part that we have to charge for. I mean, there's no free lunch in healthcare. And so as the numbers work, and remember, the retiree part is pretty important as well, because we're covering the 75% of their costs we're covering through all those who are active up until they turn 65 at Medicare age. But as I said, the number from retirement to 65 is one of the growing areas, and as far as expense, they're also one of the faster growing cost groups as well, because guess what? They're 55 years old and they're beginning to, take blood pressure medicine and everything else. So it's a complicated issue, not the same issue that business doesn't go through all the time as well, but we don't have a lot of choices, and it's a tough issue, but we don't have any choice either. We've got to cover this shortfall. We've got to continue to provide health care, but everybody is going to have to pay the part that they have to contribute to the overall cost. The answer in Medicaid was care management and putting it under contract, and there may be many arguments about CMOs, but the truth is our growth rate for Medicaid has reached a reasonable level. So maybe there are some options that we need to continue to work on state health benefit plan as well.
You've been talking a lot about customer service and improving it for both businesses and individuals, but I'm wondering, does that kind of change really impact the bottom line?
If you're needing a license renewed and you're a nurse or you're a building contractor, you're somebody in business, and your business depends on being legally licensed, and you have some issue or you're unable to get in touch with the licensing board or the Secretary of State's office for some reason, or there's a delay, and that's one of the budget problems, is that they've informed us that this budget cuts lengthen the time between the time it takes to process the renewal. So all we're saying is we need to look at those issues. A 7-hour wait for a phone call to the Department of Revenue is just not satisfactory, and yet they may be doing the best they can given the flood of calls that they have. So what we've tried to do is focus on the biggest need, put some dollars there to ensure that the knowledgeable people are answering the phone and helping to solve problems, or that we're keeping the wait times for the issuance of licenses or renewal are reasonable times. And we've done a lot to strengthen government because we've had to, but I think at this point the thing we want to do is be sure we're helping individuals get the information they need and helping businesses to grow their businesses and hopefully pay taxes and keep the state going. We just think that's, of all the things that we could be doing, those are two of the most important things we could do.
The information you shared with the Senate Appropriations Committee did sound a bit dismal, and I'm wondering, are there any emerging sources of revenue?
Revenues are, the trends are good. Our revenue has been trending up. It's in the 6 to 9% range. There's always a reason. I mean, every time we have a month where it looks good, there's always a but, kind of an issue with it. Like February was up, but they claimed that maybe 2 weeks of March revenues in one particular type were in there, and you can't really tell. So it's always better to wait a month. But there's no doubt that the trends are better. The problem, though, is the way we measure it is every month against the same month a year ago. A year ago, things started getting better little by little until in June we became positive over the year before. So the mountain we have to climb, the number we have to work against, is getting higher and higher. So my opinion is, even as our revenues go up, the percentage is going to get smaller and smaller, I believe. But hopefully we can keep that trend going. I mean, Governor Deal's budget depends on a very healthy revenue estimate. The issues we're identifying now in Medicaid and state health benefit, the unemployment trust fund, all those are issues that don't get any better in 2013. And believe it or not, we're already starting to worry about 2013 a year from now, like we used to worry about 2012. But you look around the state and you see some very positive things, and I'm always optimistic for the most part.
Now, the amended budget went through the House and Senate without a conference committee. That was certainly historic. How do things look for the 2012 budget?
Oh, we'll have a conference committee, and there are some issues we need to resolve. I don't know that we found the right plan on both Medicaid and the state health benefit plan. It came up in the middle of the session, was not included in the governor's budget proposal. So I think we need a conference committee to help get together and work through these issues. Hopefully we can work down the amount of premium increase for state employees and retirees. One of our goals, I think, will be to come up with a plan that does not increase their premiums by 20% or 19%. It maybe is something lower than that, as low as possible. So we've got a lot to talk about, but there are a lot of agrees as well. And I would say this conference is not going to be a conference of competing ideas as much as collaboration on, along with the governor, of what can we do to solve the problems together. And I look forward with Chairman England. He's a great guy to work with, and he's certainly got good ideas, and he and I work together very well.
Well, it sounds good. Senator Jack Hill is the head of the Senate Appropriations Committee. I want to thank you so much for joining us on Primetime Lawmakers.
All right, as good as you get.
Yes, it is. After this short break, we'll turn our attention to the progress of Sunday sales. A House vote could come this week. I'll be joined on set by Representative Roger Williams, chairman of the House Regulated Industries Committee, and Amy Henderson of the Georgia Municipal Association. We'll talk about how things may play out if the law passes. Stay with us. Welcome back to Primetime Lawmakers. Legislation to allow alcohol sales on Sundays has been lurking around the Capitol for many years, but veto threats from former Governor Sonny Perdue have always stalled passage. Until now, Governor Nathan Deal has indicated that he will not veto a Sunday sales bill if passed, and both the House and Senate have versions of the bill before them this year. SB 10, sponsored by Senator John Bullock, has gained the most traction this session, having passed the full Senate and the House Regulated Industries Committee. The measure is currently in House rules, awaiting placement of the House calendar. The bill would allow local governments to hold referendums to let voters decide whether or not to allow alcohol package sales between certain hours on Sundays. I'm joined on set tonight by Representative Roger Williams, chairman of the House Regulated Industries Committee. Representative Williams is carrying SB 10 in the House. And to talk about what could happen after passage of the bill, assuming that eventuality, Amy Henderson of the Georgia Municipal Association is with us this evening. Thanks for joining us. And this has certainly been a buzz issue for the Georgia General Assembly. Your phone's been ringing, hasn't it?
It has, and a lot of people have been talking to us about it. The momentum's out there, Scott. It's toward the end of the session. There's some swapping and delaying and that sort of thing, and holding bills hostage. And I understand that. That's part of politics. But the momentum is really out there. People are asking all the time, when are we going to get this bill?
Now, it has cleared your committee, obviously, and now it's in the House Rules Committee.
House Rules, that's
and
right.
You're saying holding hostage is what might be involved in a deal to get it out of rules and onto the floor of the Georgia House?
Well, between the Senate and the House, and apparently there's a bill somewhere along the way that someone wants it can't get out. So we said, well, we'll hold this one until we get something from you. So it's kind of a swap deal. Mm-hmm. And that goes on all the time, but it sometimes gets real frustrating when you got the momentum going. And hopefully we could have got this thing out this week, and hope we still can. It's not dead, but it's dragging, and I'm anxious to get it going. And I feel like it's going to pass the House and get it out for people to begin to look forward to voting on it.
This is momentous, and if anything, it doesn't bring to the era the era of blue laws in Georgia, but it certainly ushers in a new era, doesn't it, in a way?
Well, not really, because, right now it's legal to drink on Sunday, bars and restaurants and that sort of thing by the drink. Package sales is no different. It's still the use of purchase of alcohol. The thing about the package sales that they can take it home and drink it rather than and do it out in public. So I guess it's probably the final straw of a blue law that that may go by the wayside.
Mm-hmm. Amy Henderson, it's great to have you from the Georgia Municipal Association, and I'll get back to Representative Williams on some more of these procedural things. But while you're here, assuming passage, who and how would a question be called in a local community on whether or not people can even consider selling packaged alcohol on Sundays?
The first time that they'd be able to vote on it would be in the November election in November of this year, November 8th. And you know, they've been putting, I know, a lot of pressure on the legislature to get this bill, to get the option to vote. Next, the pressure is going to switch to the local governments, to the cities and the counties. And this year is an election year for most cities in Georgia. So that's where the pressure is going to be. If this is something a community really wants, and this is where we really see the concept of local control that we talk about a lot, is the laws of the community reflecting the values of the community. And if this is something that people really want, then they're going to start putting the pressure on their council members. The council will have to call for the election, and then it would be on the November ballot.
Okay, and so nothing in this law compels any council or commission
No.
to call this question,
No,
right?
they don't have to. If everybody in the community wants this and the council doesn't call it, I would suspect that at the next election you're going to see some people running against those people, you know, on council. But they're under no obligation to call for an election.
Digging into the law, Representative Williams, is there anything in this law that compels a store, even in a county that passes this package alcohol measure, to open on Sunday? Does it compel any store to sell alcohol if that owner doesn't want to?
No, it's not. There's no mandates in this bill at all, Scott. The bill itself, it by itself, does nothing. I mean, it sits there until the people, the voters, act upon it. But if a liquor store doesn't want to open, it doesn't have to. If they want to shorten the hours, it's up to them. They can shorten the hours to whatever. A lot of the communities now have restrictions on the hours that they can serve it, so they could shorten it up and put it in the referendum to tell people that that's when they can buy it.
And SB 10, the Senate version, which pretty well crawled through, finally made it over to the House, which moved fairly quickly on this issue.
Right.
It has a defined set of hours in it that the locals can operate within.
Right, 12:30 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. up to 11:30. But if a city says our ordinance says you close at 10, then they can close at 10 by putting it in the referendum. So it's still local control.
So there's a lot of leeway in there, isn't there?
There is. I mean, and this is what local control is about. And I think that's one thing we as an association have really enjoyed watching this debate. We haven't really been so much involved in it, but watching it because people have been really talking about what local control is.
You've been hearing from your members, I'm sure. Where is it most apt to go quickly, and where is it not?
I think right now we haven't heard specifically that, you know, we're going to definitely have this on the ballot. I think really that conversation is really going to start this summer. We have qualifying for elections, for municipal elections, starts in the end of August. So I think you're going to start hearing some of that more. I suspect that you're going to see it more in your urbanized areas where you already have laws on the books about, you know, having liquor by the drink. Those kind of, we're a little bit more progressive about their alcohol sales now. They're probably more likely.
Would there be a special election for this one question alone, or would that, I see you shaking your head over here, Representative?
No, we can't call for a special election for this. It can be on elections. If a special election is called for something else, it can ride on it, but they can't themselves call for a special election. We decided that's not the way to go at it. So it'd be general election, primaries, special election by something else. Then they can add that to it, but not just on their own.
How about speaking to any significant differences between what the House has worked on and what the Senate has worked on here? Is there any real friction there?
We tailored the bill almost identical. I think the hours, the leeway in hours are about the only thing in it that changed. And when it came to our committee, we decided let's use the Senate bill. And the beauty of that is if we get no amendments, which I hope we don't get, then the governor, it'll go straight to the governor's office and would not have to go back to the Senate. So hopefully, and the governor has indicated he will sign it, provided it's got the referendum, and it does have that. So if we can just get it out of the House, then we can get it to the governor's office.
Now, you've been around a while. Are you hearing any poison pill amendments that are being considered to kill this thing?
Well, I don't think there's going to be. Now, this is under a structured, modified structured rule, which means the only amendments that could come from it would have to come out of the Rules Committee. So when it hits the floor, no amendments will be allowed. So I feel pretty comfortable it'll go as is. And
Ms. Henderson, any new concerns that you're hearing from your members about safety, or does this play into the court that it's safer to have packaged alcohol sales and consume at home?
I haven't really heard any of those discussions. And again, I think it's most commonly going to pass in the communities that are already dealing with alcohol. I mean, they're used to it, and I would say too, it's probably going to be a lot easier in the communities where you have a larger population of people who have come here from another state, where they do have package sales on Sunday. For them, it's not such a big deal to have this. So I think you'll see in those communities, if it's called on the ballot, it'll be a fairly easy question.
Yeah, there may be some towns that never call it.
Absolutely.
That's
There's
right.
a lot
Exactly
of communities
right.
now that don't have grocery stores, don't have convenience stores, so this will never be an issue until that is changed, and then their community values are such that they would probably never call for it.
Yeah.
Regional issues here connected to this? You said it's in the more populated areas, it'll probably flow first.
I think so. Probably some of the isolated areas where they're real conservative, what we consider the Bible Belt, probably would not call for the referendum. Metro areas and larger areas, they would be more apt to call for the referendum. And where it's, like Amy said, the communities now that it's legal, it would just kind of mesh into what they're already doing, except it'd just be another day.
And underline something that some opponents may bring up, especially out of the news cycle. Does this change any county or any community from dry to wet?
They can't do it with this bill. They've got to be legal to start with before they can even act on this piece of legislation. So they can't use it to legalize. They can't use it if it's already not legal. So they would have to be legal before they could ever use this bill.
So that had to be separate questions, then.
Right.
They couldn't do them in the same election.
No, could not
Okay.
be.
Right. Are you hearing anything about that? Has anyone even thought about doing that?
I haven't heard any of that, no.
Nobody's going to run that quickly, are they? The revenue implications in all this. Some folks have been pushing this, said, yeah, it will improve the bottom lines in some local communities. Any new numbers on that, or is that really even play into this?
The estimate out there somewhere is an increase of about $4 million. Wouldn't be a tremendous amount, but it would help the budget revenue for the budget now, especially in the border, like in my area in Dalton, Whitfield. They've been going to Tennessee and buying it there, which would get that business. But the grocery stores say that Sunday is one of the largest days of customers in the week, and a lot of them, that's when they want to go buy it. People come from out of town and they go to expect to buy a bottle of wine or whatever, and I'm sorry, sir, you can't do it. It's really disappointing, and they can't understand why. And we're only, one of 3 states that doesn't allow it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would say too, with the question about the revenue, even though I don't have any particular numbers, we did hear a lot during this past recession from finance officers that all the taxes going down, alcohol sales did not in a lot of areas during the recession. So while that's probably not going to be a big concern, I mean, it's certainly going to be in the back of the minds of the councils and your county governments when they're considering this.
Yeah, as far as opposition is concerned, obviously convenience stores and the grocery stores have been pushing this for years. Some liquor store owners have said, no, we don't want to have to open on Sunday. Have they backed off, or are they still in there trying to twist
I think they've quietened down about it, the fact that they realize, of course, they're jealous, they're afraid they'll lose revenue, but that's their option. And but I think more and more are coming around and say, well, if the rest of them are going to open, we're going to open also.
Well, my friend Dan Cathy has signs on all of his Chick-fil-A's that say we close on Sunday, and while Dan Cathy probably wouldn't have anything to do with what liquor stores do, that's been pretty good philosophy for them.
They've made it. They really have.
Yeah, they've done very well. Scott,
This is just a fairness issue versus allowing it to be sold by the drink. And for package sales, it's a fairness. It doesn't have anything to, as we had on our previous discussion with Jerry LaGuire, he admitted it wasn't religious, it wasn't drinking, but it's a fact of giving people an opportunity to voice their opinion on this bill.
Well, a little last-minute drama for the legislature. We'll watch it happen. Thanks very much for coming to talk to us about this evening. We appreciate it. Coming up tomorrow on Primetime Lawmakers, the House is expected to take up a measure to establish an advisory commission on mandatory health insurance. This is in response to federal health care legislation. We'll continue our leadership interview series. Attorney General Sam Olens is scheduled to join us, plus in-depth analysis on important legislative issues and the latest Capitol news. That's tomorrow night at 7. You can see a repeat of this broadcast, Primetime Lawmakers, at 5:30 tomorrow morning. Now, coming up next, Bert Wolf, Travels and Traditions. Tonight, Bert explores immigrating to America. Stay tuned for Bert Wolf next on GPB. And that's our broadcast for this 35th Legislative Day of the 2011 session. Thanks to our guests for joining us tonight. From Wandy Lawson and the whole Primetime Lawmakers team, I'm Scott Slade. See you tomorrow night right here. Have a good night.
This is a GPB original production.